12-year-old Jem Rourke had always been a curious boy, a kind who wandered where signs said, "Do not enter," and who climbed canyon walls just to see what was on the other side. And it was that same curiosity that pulled him out of bed. In the middle of the night, when a strange green light tore through the sky and crashed deep into the desert just beyond the old mining zone where no one ever went anymore. The next morning, as the sun lit the red rocks of Mirror Lake, Jem grabbed his backpack, stuffed it with a flashlight, a bottle of water, and his mother's old binoculars, then slipped out before anyone could ask questions, following the trail of scorched earth and broken brush until he reached a narrow canyon he had never seen before, where the air smelled like burnt metal and the birds were silent. And as he moved deeper, a cold breeze brushed his skin even though the day was hot, and then he saw it a massive object buried in the canyon floor, its surface dark and smooth, broken in places but still pulsing with faint blue lights, like it was breathing, alive but wounded. Jem's heart pounded as he crept closer, trying to understand what he was looking at. It wasn't a plane or a satellite. It was something else, something alien. And as he reached out and touched the metal, it was warm like skin, and suddenly a narrow door hissed open, revealing a glowing hallway filled with floating dust and soft, whispering sounds that weren't quite voices, but still felt like someone was speaking inside his mind. And before he could run, a calm, strange voice spoke from the shadows in perfect English. "Human child. Access confirmed. Welcome aboard, Jem Rourke," freezing him in place because how did it know his name? And why was it waiting for someone like him? He hesitated, torn between fear and wonder, but something inside the ship shifted, almost like it sighed in relief, and the air changed, feeling less like danger and more like invitation, like it had been waiting a long time for someone, not a scientist or soldier, but a child, someone young, untrained, and open. And Jem, with all his nerves and excitement tangled together, took one trembling step into the strange craft, the door closing behind him with a soft hiss as lights flickered to life, showing symbols he couldn't read and corridors that seemed to twist and turn on their own. And deep inside, past broken panels and flickering lights, a central chamber glowed brighter than the rest, pulsing like a heartbeat, and there, a round interface lit up with soft blue rings, scanning him slowly, before the voice returned, warmer this time, almost like a whisper from a storybook. "I have been waiting for you," and Jem whispered back, "Who? What are you?" And the voice replied, "I am Lyra, guardian of this vessel, and you are the one I was programmed to trust," which made no sense at all to Jem, who was just a boy from a dusty town. But as he stepped closer to the glowing heart of the ship, he felt something impossible, a connection, as if the ship could feel his thoughts and was gently reaching into them, not to control, but to understand. And in that moment, Jem forgot about the outside world, forgot about rules and danger and adults who always told him to stay away, because something amazing had just begun, something bigger than his small town or his small life. And though he didn't know it yet, the crash wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something much more, and Jem had just stepped into the center of a mystery that had waited across stars for a single human child to find it. Jem stood frozen in the glowing room, staring at the strange circular core that pulsed, with light like it was alive and the voice that called itself Lyra seemed to float all around him, calm and kind, yet full of something deep and ancient. And as he took another step forward, small lights lit up beneath his feet, guiding him to a smooth platform where symbols danced in the air, too quick to read, but beautiful like music turned into light. He reached out without thinking, and the lights shifted, the room adjusting its shape, showing walls that bent and shimmered like water. And Lyra spoke again, her voice filled with quiet pride, saying, "You are the first to enter since the fall. You are exactly what was needed." And Jem, confused and curious, asked why a ship like this would be waiting for someone like him, just a boy with scraped shoes and a love for exploring. And Lyra explained that long ago she had been built by a peaceful race known as the Ilari, who believed that children held the purest truth of any species, and so they programmed her to stay silent unless she found a young human whose mind had not yet been shaped by fear, greed, or hate, and only such a mind could restart her mission. She told him her purpose was not war or power, but something better. She carried the knowledge of many worlds, seeds from 1,000 planets, stories, music, and dreams, all meant to be shared with species across the stars. But her journey ended when she was attacked by dark forces that feared what she carried, and she had fallen through a wormhole, crashing here, hidden and silent until now. And Jem, though still unsure why he had been chosen, felt something swell inside him, a mix of wonder and responsibility, as he looked around at glowing panels, star maps drawn in light, and gentle hums that made the whole ship feel like it was breathing slowly in its sleep. Lyra asked him if he wanted to learn, and though he was scared, he said yes, and in seconds the room changed again, showing holograms of distant galaxies, creatures of light, forests made of crystal, and machines that moved like animals, all waiting to be rediscovered. And as he watched, something stirred deep in the ship, a vibration, soft at first, but growing sharper, and LY's tone changed, now more alert, as she said, "We are not alone," and the images vanished, replaced by a flashing red signal showing movement above the canyon. And Lyra explained that the ship had been hidden by a cloaking field, but his entry had weakened it, and now others, humans, were nearby, maybe scientists or soldiers drawn by the crash, and they would try to break inside, not knowing the ship's true purpose. Jem asked what would happen if they entered, and Lyra said the core would lock again, possibly forever, because adult minds were too complicated, too broken by fear. And Jem realized that this moment right now might be the only chance the ship would have to awaken, and he was the only one it trusted. The pressure in his chest grew, not because he was afraid of the people coming, but because he didn't want this wonder to end, didn't want this chance to vanish. And LYRA offered him one option. She could open a deeper part of the ship, a place only he could reach, to learn how to keep it alive and hidden. But he would need to act fast. Outside, Jem could now hear faint thumps echoing through the canyon, footsteps, voices, tools, and panic started to rise. But LYRA's voice calmed him again, saying, "Do not fear them, but do not let them break what they do not understand." And Jem nodded, wiping sweat from his brow as a door slid open to a dark stairway leading downward into the ship's core memory chamber. And as he stepped inside, the walls lit up with lines of starlight, and for a moment it felt like he was floating through space, all alone but not lonely, because Lyra was with him, guiding him, trusting him, and he could feel it now that this ship was not just waiting. For a child it had been waiting for him, Jem Rourke, the boy who listened, who wondered, who believed. And as he reached the chamber and placed his hand on the final control ring, the ship glowed brighter than ever, and Lyra whispered, "You are now part of the mission," just as the ground above shook from approaching footsteps, and Jem knew time was running out, but for the first time he wasn't afraid. He was ready. Jem stood in the glowing memory chamber, his hand still resting on the control ring as the soft light pulsed around him like a heartbeat. And though the ship felt calm, the world outside was not through the walls. He could hear the distant sounds of drilling and mechanical footsteps growing closer. And LYRA's voice came again, gentle but urgent, saying, "Someone is here. Not like you, not ready." And Jem asked if it was the government, but Lyra couldn't tell who exactly, only that they were adult, armed, and not guided by curiosity, but by orders, and the ship's sensors showed a figure in a black suit with a helmet standing at the crash site, scanning the area with a cold, blinking device that gave off red pulses like radar. Lyra dimmed all lights and locked the top entrance, but she explained the locks wouldn't hold long. This person had tools and training, and if they got inside, they might damage her systems or trigger the wrong response. Jem asked if Lyra could fly away, but she said her engines were still damaged and she needed time, which meant someone had to protect her now, not with weapons, but with quick thinking and trust. And Jem realized he couldn't hide forever. He had to do something. He climbed back up to the hallway where he first entered and peeked through a small crack in the wall, just in time to see the figure step through the canyon shadows, holding a strange metal tool that hummed with power. And when they touched the outer hull, the door trembled, warning that the seal wouldn't last long, and Lyra whispered, "He is forcing entry? Jem, you must decide open the ship to him, or try to stop him from getting in." And Jem, though shaking, whispered back, "If I let him in, he'll take you apart, won't he?" And Lyra didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Suddenly a small panel near Jem opened, revealing a glowing orb the size of a baseball, and Lyra said, "This is a light key. It can confuse his scanners for a moment and give us time." And Jem took it, holding it tight, then stepped out of the shadows and ran silently to a crack in the hull, where the figure's equipment was sending sparks across the metal. The man turned fast, startled by Jem's sudden appearance, and shouted, "You, kid, get back. This area is restricted." But Jem didn't stop. He rolled the orb across the ground, and it lit up with a blinding blue flash that sent static across the air and made the man stumble backward, dropping his scanner. Jem used those few seconds to slam the emergency lock back into place and whisper to LYRA, "Seal it again," and the ship obeyed, fusing the panel shut with a bright weld of white fire, just as the man regained control and pounded on the outer wall, shouting for backup into a small wrist radio. Inside, LYR thanked Jem and said, "That was brave, but he will not stop now." And Jem nodded, breathless, knowing more people would come soon, maybe even ships, and he asked if there was any way to hide the entire vessel again, but Lyra said that kind of cloak took power more than she had left, unless he could reach the bridge core, a part of the ship still sealed. because it needed a full trust signal, something only a child could give. And Jem asked what that meant, and Lyra said, "You must show the ship your thoughts, your dreams. Without hiding anything, it will only open if it believes you truly care." And though it sounded strange, Jem agreed. And a path opened to a round room filled with floating lights like fireflies, and in the center was a chair surrounded by curved screens. As he sat down, the room dimmed and filled with quiet music, and the screens began to glow, not with stars or maps, but with images from his own life, his mother singing at night, his drawings of rockets, the notebook where he wrote about flying, and Lyra asked, "Is this what you want to protect?" And Jem said yes, all of it, even the silly parts, because it was his. And suddenly the room lit up with a surge of power, and Lyra whispered, "The bridge core accepts you." And in that moment, the ship began to hum louder, energy flowing. Through every wall and outside, the man in black looked up in shock as the ship shimmered and vanished completely from view, leaving only silence and dust behind. Inside, Lyra spoke again, softer now, almost smiling. "You have done more than I hoped, Jem Rourke. The ship is safe, and so are its dreams." And Jem, still catching his breath, whispered, "But he'll come back, won't he?" And Lyra said, "Yes, but so will you." And the lights dimmed as the ship, once a broken relic in the desert, now pulsed quietly in a hidden pocket of space, held there by the belief of one small human boy who dared to protect something far beyond. His world. Jem sat in the glowing chair of the bridge core, the lights all around him dancing like stars in a dark sea, and though the ship was hidden again, safe for now, he knew that wouldn't last long. Lyra had already detected 3 more signals moving toward the crash site, and the man in black was no longer alone. Backup had arrived, and they were bringing heavier equipment, maybe even weapons, and Jem felt the pressure grow in his chest as Lyra quietly told him, "If they break through again, I may not survive a second intrusion." And Jem asked if there was any way to escape, and Lyra paused before saying, "There is one option. Emergency liftoff." And the words hung in the air like thunder, exciting and terrifying at the same time, and Jem asked what that would mean, and Lyra explained that she had just enough power, now that the bridge core was reactivated, to lift off from Earth and enter low orbit, where solar energy could help begin her repairs. But to do that, she needed a living co-pilot, someone the system trusted, and right now that someone was only him. Jem's heart raced, and he looked around at the glowing symbols that now bent toward his hands, ready to follow his thoughts, and he asked softly, "Can I even fly this thing?" And Lyra replied, "Not alone, but together, yes." And though the idea of leaving Earth, even for a short time, made his stomach twist, Jem also knew that staying here meant the ship would be taken apart, misunderstood, or destroyed by people who only saw danger in things they didn't understand. Lyra opened a screen to show the figures outside setting up a strange pulse cannon, and Jem could see the red light building at its center, aimed right at the ship's hull, and there was no more time to wait. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Okay, let's do it." And at once the ship roared to life, lights brightening across every corridor, energy flowing like rivers under glass, and Lyra's voice filled the chamber with calm instructions. Hands on the control ring. Hold steady. Keep your focus on the sky. and Jem obeyed, heart pounding as the chair locked into place, and the floor beneath him began to tremble. Outside, the men backed away, shouting into their radios, as the ground shook and dust rose into the air, and then, with a sudden burst of blinding blue light, the ship broke free from the canyon floor, rising slowly at first, then faster and faster as Jem held the ring with both hands, his eyes wide as the sky opened above him, and the stars began to appear. And Lyra said softly, "You're doing well, Jem. We are almost free." And then they were breaking through the last layers of atmosphere, the ship rising into the black silence of space, where the earth curved below like a blue marble wrapped in clouds, and Jem stared at it, breathless, his hands still locked on the controls as the ship floated free. And for a moment there was only peace, the hum of the engines, and the soft voice of Lyra saying, "We made it." But the moment didn't last long. Lyra revealed that she had detected a new signal, not from Earth but from far above. Something watching them, something that had responded the moment she rose again. And Jem asked if it was a threat, and Lyra said she didn't know yet, but it had found them very quickly, and that meant someone or something in deep space still remembered her, and possibly the mission she carried. Jem asked what the mission really was, and Lyra replied that her original purpose was to share, not to conquer or spy, but to share knowledge and kindness between worlds. And the last message of her builders was to trust a human child with that gift, for children had the clearest hearts. And Jem whispered, "But I'm just a kid." And Lyra answered, "And that is exactly why you were chosen." And before he could say more, the ship's long-range screen flashed with new images, distant lights, unknown shapes moving slowly at the edge of space, and Jem realized that their journey had only just begun, and the choice he made wasn't just about escaping the canyon, but stepping into something far bigger, something full of danger and wonder. And as the ship adjusted course and began to orbit, Lyra asked one final question. "Jem Rourke, would you like to continue the mission?" And though his hands still shook and his mind raced, he looked out at the stars and gave a small, certain nod, saying, "Yes, I want to see what's out there." And with that, the ship shifted, gliding silently into the dark with a human boy at its heart, carrying the last hopes of a vanished race and the first spark of something new. The stars stretched endlessly before him, and as Jem sat in the center of the ship's glowing bridge, Earth slowly shrinking behind him, he realized he was no longer just a boy from Mirror Lake. He was something more now, something chosen. And though the ship felt warm and full of light, his heart beat fast with both fear and wonder. Lyra's voice, always calm, spoke again, saying, "Jem, the signal we detected has responded. They are approaching." And before he could ask who or what, a soft tremor passed through the ship's hull, and a floating image appeared on the main screen, a long silver vessel, shaped like a feather, drifting slowly toward them, surrounded by lights that blinked like eyes. And Jem asked, "Is it one of yours?" And Lyra answered, "No, but it remembers us," which made Jem feel both nervous and curious. The strange ship stopped just ahead of them, close but not too close, and Jem held his breath as a signal arrived, a pattern of soft tones and lights that danced like music in the air. And Lyra translated quietly, "They are asking who you are." And Jem, unsure of what to say, replied, Tell them I'm Jem, a human child. And Lyra did, her voice turning into light that streamed out into the stars. And for a long moment there was no answer, just silence, until the silver ship slowly opened a hatch, and from it came a figure not solid like a person, but made of shifting threads of light, floating toward them like a dream. And Jem stepped forward, heart pounding, as Lyra said, "Do not be afraid. They're curious." And the glowing being stopped outside the main window, raising one long arm made of light, a gesture of peace. And Jem slowly raised his hand back, not knowing if it would understand, but the figure pulsed brighter, and Lyra whispered, "It sees you, and it knows what you carry." And with that, the ship's memory core activated again, sending out bursts of gentle energy filled with the sounds and images of 1,000 worlds, all stored safely inside LYR forests with golden leaves, oceans, under twin suns, songs sung in voices that no longer exist, and the light being listened, watched, and slowly began to change, shifting into shapes that looked more human, more like Jem. And Lyra explained that it was learning from him, copying him to understand better. And then came the message, not in words, but in thoughts that filled Jem's mind like a dream. "We remember the builders. We thought they were lost, but you carry their hope, and now you are their voice." Jem didn't know how to reply, but somehow, deep inside, he understood what was being asked of him. The mission wasn't just about keeping the ship safe. It was about sharing what was inside it, passing it on, and helping other beings remember things they had forgotten. Peace, wonder, kindness. The light being slowly faded back into its silver ship, but not before sending one final image to LYRA, a map of stars marked with soft pulses, showing places where others still waited, others like them, lonely or afraid or hidden. And LYRA said softly, "It is an invitation to continue." And Jem looked at the map, so full of distant stars and unknown names, and felt both small and powerful, because he was the first child to leave Earth not for war or fear, but to offer something: simple friendship, memory, and the human gift of dreaming beyond what is seen. Lyra asked him once more, "Are you ready, Jem?" And he nodded, stronger this time, and said, "Let's go." And the ship turned slowly, sliding into the dark, following the trail of stars left by the ones who had come before. And as Earth faded behind the curve of the moon, Jem thought about his mother, his home, his world, and whispered, "I'll come back one day." And Lyra replied, "When Earth is ready, you will return as the child ambassador." And the ship vanished into the stars, carrying a boy and a dream across the endless sky.